everybody. We are live. It is Thursday, May the 20th, 2021, 12:51 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name's Dave McCrae, coming to you live from the VoiceMann Studios in Toronto, Canada. And this is episode 173 of MCRAE Live. And today is an interesting topic that I wanted to tackle for a number of reasons. If you see me looking over here, it is because I have a new monitor in this space. Ordinarily, I have a monitor in my booth right here. You can see this is a walk-in closet right there. If you go in there and go this way, it opens up a little bit. And that's, of course, where I do my professional voiceover work. And I have a monitor in there, which I look at. And sometimes what I've been doing in the past, when I've had guests on or when I've been looking at stuff and going to the other screen and stuff, I've been using the monitor in the booth. So sometimes you'll see me doing this in the past because I've been looking through cracks kind of in the, in the door kind of. But what I've done is I've got a new monitor now, and I've got a monitor set up here. You can kind of see it. I don't want to bring it too far over, but it's over here like this. So that's perfect. Just off camera a little bit like that. I don't want it on camera because it could become distracting. But it's a nice 27-inch monitor here as well on a mount, which is great. So now this is perfect. This is awesome. So if you see me looking over there, that's why. That's going to help on Saturday movie nights and Two Dudes and all that kind of stuff as well. So that's going to be awesome. Welcome, folks. Welcome to the show. I'm glad you are here. If you're tuning in live or after the fact, thank you so much for being here. Today's a topic I wanted to tackle because of I didn't realize how much of a hot button issue this can be for some people. Now, I'm not talking about anybody specific. It's what I've noticed in the general sense of sort of the horror community, the Halloween community, and people that have messaged me, DM'd me, and all that kind of jazz. And it's understandable why people would feel the way they do about this kind of thing. And I feel, and I don't mean to say this I feel I am. Now, again, I don't know anybody else's history and past and all that kind of stuff, but I feel that I am in a unique position to be able to speak about this topic from a very unique perspective. And I'll get into that in a moment. Last Friday, so I think it was last Friday, it was almost a week ago, I made a video talking about how a trusted source who I connect with, I have several, but this is one individual, let me know that the Halloween Kills trailer, July, you know that, right? I did a video on it, talked a bit about it there, and then 2 days, was it 2 days after that? Was it earlier? The days are bleeding into each other, honest to God. We got the world premiere of It's Me, Billy this Saturday. Some people in the chat may be attending that. I'm not sure. It was part of an Indiegogo perk. Then, of course, we got the official release next week. It's all Billy next week. So, I mean, it's insane. A few days after that, I had to make, I didn't have to. I chose to make a social media post because whenever I get messages that I get a sense that there might be some people out there that aren't quite understanding, I tend to want to nip things in the butt. So I just make kind of a statement, right? Therefore, it's something I can point to if I get, more DMs that come in and do this. And I was being called out. There were a lot of people that were calling me out that were messaging me, whether it was Twitter, whether it was Facebook, whatever the case is, saying, you're full of shit, or, stop saying you have sources, or stop doing this, or, oh, right, you have this, all that kind of stuff, right? And those things don't bother me. I mean, listen, it doesn't bother me, but I see it as an opportunity to sort of clarify my position where I am. And then I thought, what a wonderful opportunity it would be to talk about sources today, because I think it's an important topic that everybody should pay attention to. And again, I'm not saying I am the authority on all things in this area, but I think because of my life and how I grew up and who my father was, I come at this from a very unique perspective that the average person may not have. That doesn't mean there aren't others out there that don't have that same experience. Of course there are, and may have the same experience from a different perspective. But I treat this kind of thing very seriously, and there's reasons for that. So, it is not, okay, so where do I start? Let me start here. Let me start by taking a drink of water first. It's tap water too, because I'm out of fucking bottled water. Oh, God. Gotta go get bottled water.
Why don't you use a filter? Brita. Use the Brita filter.
No, anyway. So, okay, so let me talk about a bit about how let me start here. So, I talked about this on social media, actually just on Twitter. I think I mentioned this, because I was reminiscing. It was my father's birthday a few weeks ago on May the 3rd. He would have been 79 this year. He passed away in 2011, as my mother did as well, for two very different reasons. My dad was a heart attack. My mom was cancer. They had been divorced for 20 something years. So they weren't together. They were civil. They were, fine with each other, but they hadn't been together in like 25 years, right? But anyway, so it was his birthday a few weeks ago, and I was going through some old photos and, getting in the feels, you know what I mean? Because it was 10 years ago this year that he passed, and I miss him a lot. I miss both my parents a lot, but I miss my dad a lot. And I shared some, I know I've talked about this before, but I shared some photos on Twitter. Because not everybody knows who my dad was or what my dad did for a living. And it was really cool. It wasn't always easy growing up with my father, but because it was tough, but it was, looking back at it, it was an interesting experience. It was just normal to me, although it would have been a unique experience for some. My dad was a journalist, a columnist. He, for a large portion of his life, certainly early on through the 70s and the 80s, he was one of the top columnists in the country. And he had written all sorts of, he had written not like, he worked, okay, when he first began, he worked in news and things like that. And then when he got into the 70s, he fell into sports. But he wasn't writing like, the scores and shit like that. My dad was writing like feature editorial, articles on athletes and amazing shit that he won awards for. He traveled all over the world, you know what I mean? And then of course through the 80s and then the 90s, my dad left Toronto, moved to Ottawa, which is our Washington, D.C., and he worked there until his death. And my dad covered the Mike Tyson trial in 92, I think it was, Princess Diana's funeral in 97. He was there in the chapel, like 4 people away from Elton John. My dad had a hell of a life. And I learned a lot from my father. And one of the things I learned about from my dad is, I've mentioned this before on the show. I've said, he says, it doesn't matter if they like you or they hate you. The question is, are they reading you? And of course, that is true. You know what I mean? And I always took that as sort of kind of place it in here where people aren't really reading me, but it's like, it doesn't matter if they like you or hate you. The question is, are they watching you? So my dad was a funny guy, but there's truth to that. And one of the things that I learned about my father is how important sources are and how not important sources are and what an important source is. And I remember there was a black book, not that kind of black book, but there was a black phone book about this big in my dad's office, home office. And I remember one time I was a teenager, and I remember he had a separate line in that office, okay? And I remember when I was sitting there, I was on the phone with like my buddy Evan or something, right? Because I think like either my sister was on the phone or my stepmother was on the phone or something. So I couldn't use the regular line. So sometimes I'd go into my dad's office and make a phone call. So I think I was talking to my buddy Evan or whatever. And of course my dad's, desk had all shit all over it. And there was this black book and I was just flipping through it as I was talking to him. And the phone numbers that my dad had in this book would blow you away, like home phone numbers of people. It was like, what the fuck? And, shit like that, whatever. So that was sort of the catalyst. I remember talking to my dad about that. I was like, Dad, like, there's some pretty heavy duty phone numbers in this phone book, you know, sports athletes, actors, things like that. And I was like, and he was like, yeah, you know, he told me a bit about it. And then that was sort of the catalyst that we got into this conversation about sources and that kind of stuff. And my dad was the one that taught me that number one is very few people have reputable sources. Very few people do. Most sources are, you know, somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, right? It's like I made the quip on my social media post the other day where I said, you know, I very rarely make a post saying that a source has told me this. I very rarely do that. And the reason I very rarely do that is because very rarely is information worthy of a post, right? 90% of the time, and this I learned this from my dad, and he's right. He's right, because I've learned this over the years. Most of the information you get from a source is not worthy of sharing. Most of the information you get is not that it's not true, but it's anecdotal. And it's not worthy of sharing, right? Sources, like I learned from my dad that it's a puzzle, you know? You get information, sometimes you get information from several sources and you corroborate those, you know, that info to see if it lines up, right? You don't just take at face value what somebody says and then spew it to the masses. That's where you get into trouble. That's where you get into trouble. And if you were doing that, then you'd be doing it all the time. And my dad said, you don't do that. If somebody says one thing, that's great. You go and see if, you know, somebody else is saying that same thing, right? Who you trust. And he said 90% of the time, you know, when you get to a point where you're ready to say, hey, I've heard this, or I'm going to write this, or I'm going to say this, it's been like weeks of groundwork of trying to figure that out or waiting. You know what I mean? And if you develop a relationship with a source, a trusted source, that source will also not want to give you information that is surface level, right? Very rarely are you getting information from a source that is worthy of spewing out to the masses. I learned that from my dad, and he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Another thing that I learned from my father was just because somebody is connected or says something doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, right? That's where it comes down to doing the vetting process. Who is this individual? How are they connected? Like I made the quip, right? I said Jim in dishwashing, I think, or whatever. I was trying to make a quip, right? Because most people that are YouTubers, all right, and that doesn't mean that if you're a small channel, you can't have connections. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean if you're a big channel, you do have connections. It doesn't mean that at all, right? But it is important to understand that the vast majority, based on my experience and what I've learned over the years, the vast majority of people who say they have sources don't have sources. What they have is somebody who says they're in somewhere, who may be somebody who knows somebody, but there's a funnel of there's a chain of events, right? That the info has to go through. So it's a source, but define source, right? Define it. You know, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, right? It's about firsthand sources. It's about who is this individual? How are they connected? What is their relationship? Can I trust this individual? How deep do they go? Is it Bob knows Jim, who knows Dave, who knows Steve, and Steve's the guy who knows Kevin, who knows the guy that says he knows the guy? That's not info that I would spew. I would never take that to the plate. Never. Never. I watched my dad, and I remember there was, at my dad's funeral, I spoke to somebody who worked with my dad in the 70s and the 80s and said, your dad was outstanding. He didn't just make 3 phone calls, he made 50 phone calls. And he'd make 50 more the next day. Because he didn't want to go to bat without being like above 90% sure. So it's important. The reason why I set all that up and I tell you all that is because I didn't follow in my father's footsteps and become a journalist. But in my travels through my experience in the entertainment industry, I've met, interesting people and connected people and people that are not connected and people that are connected. And, I've met a lot of interesting directors, writers, producers, executives in my travels as a professional voice actor. And I'm not saying, that I've met Steven Spielberg. I'm not saying I've been at parties like that, but I've met people that are connected in ways that are really connected. Not Bob knows Jim knows Steve knows Dave. And sometimes you develop a friendship with them and sometimes you don't. It depends on the circumstances for which you meet. It depends on the circumstances for which you are connecting, right? Most of the time it's at like an after party or it's at somebody's house or, whatever the case is. And it's oh, hey, whoa, whatever it is, right? But it doesn't go anywhere. But the longer you're in the business and you form it's about relationships. This business is about forming relationships. And it's important to me as somebody who is doing this little channel and talking about Halloween, that if I'm going to put my neck out on the line and say that a source told me, I would like to believe, although you certainly don't have to, that I have earned your respect, that I would not do that if it was Jim knows Steve knows Dave knows Bob. That's not what I'm about. So it's very important that for me, because it's my reputation, it's my neck, right? And that doesn't mean that it's going to end up being 100% right, but it's about probability, right? It's about having the right information and probability. The individual or individuals that tell me things very rarely do it. Very rarely tell me things, because there's very rarely info that is required or that is solid enough to take to the plate, right? So that's another thing. If you're watching somebody who is on a consistent basis talking about how so-and-so told them this and so-and-so told them that and so-and-so said this, reputable sources generally don't do that. Because the less they tell, the less likely it can be traced back to them. Now, you could have a source that is telling you all that because he or she is the fifth in the chain, right? So they don't have to worry about it. It's not going to come back to me. It's going to come back to Bob, to Steve, to Jim, to Don first before it ever gets to me. And then there's going to be all this hoopla in there and I'm just, I'm gone. You know what I mean? But if there's somebody who is directly connected to whatever it is, in a position where it makes sense that they would have that kind of information, very rarely do they divulge that. I learned that from my father as well. That's why it takes so long. That's why it should take so long to weed through things to figure out whether this is right, is because very rarely does that kind of information get released. I think a lot of people, and I don't know this for sure, but I think a lot of people who claim to be the source or like to think of themselves as a source get off on watching the person that they give that information to talk about them in an inconspicuous way, whether it's on YouTube or wherever. I think they like knowing that that person's talking about me. I gave them that information. I'm speculating on that, but it's just from what I've learned. And admittedly, this is my own opinion. Very rarely do reputable sources talk. They only talk when they are sure. So if you have somebody that is, like I said, spewing and flapping their lips every day or every week, chances are they're either not reputable or they are the fifth or sixth in a chain where the residual effects and the responsibility doesn't weigh heavily on them. The few sources that I have, and again, I can't tell you who they are, obviously, but the few sources that I have are not Jim knows Bob, knows Steve, knows Don. They are directly connected and in positions where information like that, knowing that kind of information would make sense. Doesn't mean that it's 100% correct, because like I said, things can change, right? Things can change. Information changes, the world can change. Things change. Things change. I could be presented with new information. That's one of the things too that we have to understand about this kind of thing, is that information that comes from, or just news information in general, should be treated like science, right? It's ever evolving and it's changing. Science says, well, this is this based on what we know now, right? Based on the information we know, based on all of our tools and all the information, this is what we know. Eggs are good for you, right? And then in 5 years, with more research and work and info and testing and figuring shit out, you suddenly realize, oh, you know what? Maybe eggs are not as good for you as we thought they were. Hey, you might want to hold off on the fucking 5 eggs there and just have 2. You know what I'm saying? It should be treated as such. There's this weird thing where if somebody says something, it should be locked and loaded and that's it. Information can and often does change. However, I would not have said what I said last week if it wasn't from a reputable person who would have that kind of information in a position and put me in a position to say that. And again, I have several sources that rarely give me info. Rarely. There's nobody that I speak to every day or every week or even every month that is telling me this kind of stuff. And like I said, this individual's from the States. I think my joke was, it's Bob from Louisiana. But again, I bring this up not in a braggadocious way. I'm not saying, oh, look at me, because who knows? I mean, in 4 weeks, the trailer could drop and it could be like June 29th and boom, I was wrong. It's about probability based on what I believe to be reputable info, based on who the individual is, based on why, if you understand what I'm saying. But again, the reason why I say all this is really all about understanding the context. And I guess I just want people to understand that it's important that we don't arbitrarily put out information that is weak, or that is just hearsay, or that is Bob knows Jim knows Steve knows Don. Because it doesn't. Now, look, I mean, you don't want to be the. I was gonna say we watched a movie. No, we watched a movie is great. You don't want to be the we got this covered. Excuse me. You don't want to be the we got this covered of that kind of thing. Because what we got this covered does is they throw everything in the kitchen sink at the wall, and then when and inevitably something's going to be true. When you throw that kind of information and that amount of information at the wall, eventually something will be true. And then you can say, you see, I told you so. But what about all the 99.9% of the crap that you also said, which wasn't true? So I've always treated this very seriously. And I think others should as well, if you are claiming to have sources. So my advice is for those who do, make sure your source isn't Jim knows Don, knows Steve, knows Frank. And that's okay if it is. But you better be very sure before information starts coming out. I like to take the more simpler approach and have a couple of people that I trust, that I know are in positions that make sense. And then, you know, I talk to them when I talk to them about this kind of stuff. And like I said, it's very, very rare. Very rarely do we ever have those types of conversations because they don't want to tell me anything that they're not certain of. So the other side of the coin is that, and I've said this on this channel many times I've said this on this channel. Making predictions, when you have a fundamental understanding of how the business side works, you can make bold predictions and they often will come true. Not because you have some sort of psychic power or that you're some sort of can see into the future, but because you've done your due diligence, you understand how the business works, and you can, make predictions based on patterns and informed opinions, right? Not just guesses that aren't based on anything, not from an emotional place, but from a place of logic and fact. You can actually make informed opinions. And a lot of people do that too, which is great. And I do that as well. Now, that doesn't mean that we're always going to be right, but certainly, again, it's about probability, right? And so that's why I've often said to people, do your due diligence to make sure that you understand how the business side of movies work. Because when you do have an understanding of how show business works in terms of the major motion picture industry, there will be decisions that will be made, that studios will make, or executives will make, or information that you will hear that will no longer perplex you, that may have once perplexed you, right? The average person might be like, what? Why are they doing that? Why are they making this? Why was that? Right? But if you understand the business side of things, I don't just mean how much something makes at the box office. I'm talking about like how show business, how the movie industry works from a studio perspective and all the different positions and the departments and all that kind of stuff. Eventually you'll go, yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me. I understand why they did that. I understand why they're doing that. That's important too. So again, these are things that I've learned throughout my life. And that was one of the things that I learned when I was in film school in the late 90s, which was I took the industry has changed a lot since 1998 and 99. But the fundamental principles are the same, right? One of my favorite classes I took in film school was film business, like learning the business side of film. And that wasn't just raising budgets and all that kind of stuff. It was the different departments and what they do and, where money is allocated and why certain decisions are made. I took a broadcast management course as well and all that kind of stuff. It was really, really, really cool and very eye-opening. So it was like, wow, like these are things the average person doesn't think of, right? So now since then, of course, yes, the industry has evolved and changed, but the principles of what I learned 2 years ago are still relevant today. And so it's very important that if you are going to be speaking on decisions that Hollywood is making or why they're making or things like that, that you have at the very least a basic understanding of how the business side of Hollywood works, because then you won't be perplexed. I mean, you may not agree with it. You may be like, oh, I don't think that, whatever, right? Like I do all the time, but certainly very, very little. And honest to God, very little surprises me anymore. Every now and then I might see something where I'm like, well, that doesn't fucking make sense. Like, why would you do that? Right? But there are things that I see people do. And again, I'm not talking about anybody specific. I'm just mean in a general sense, right? I'm not calling anybody out on this show. I'm literally not talking about anybody specific. But in a general sense, I see videos or thumbnails, from people that are perplexed by things, and they'll have like a 20-minute video and I'm just like, I don't understand why. Well, I know, and I get why, but it's not as perplexing to me as maybe it is to that individual. So again, I don't mean to, please don't misunderstand me. I don't mean to say these things as a pompous, arrogant thing. I'm not Steven Spielberg. I'm not fucking Martin Scorsese. Okay. I'm not trying to come off as God and the all-know. Please do not misunderstand. I'm just sharing my knowledge and what I've learned. I'm just sharing what I've learned over the years working in the industry as a professional voice actor who's had a relatively, decent amount of success doing what I do and the connections I've made and the things I've learned. That's it. That's all I'm doing. That's it. You can take it or leave it. You can agree with me or not. I'm just sharing knowledge. It has nothing to do with clout or anything like that. I could not care less. I literally could not care less. I get excited to share information. In case you haven't noticed, I'm a communicator, right? I communicate for a living and I get excited to share information, whether that's information like this or whether that's Halloween news or whether that's Elm Street news or it's me, Billy, or whatever it is. I get excited to share information about what we're all passionate about, right? Movies and shows and all that kind of stuff. I get excited to share that information. And I get a real kick out of it when I'm like, oh, I know what that is. Oh, fuck, I gotta tell my viewers that. I gotta fucking get on there and tell my viewers that, right? And I get the same sort of excitement when I see something, when I get DMs from people saying, oh, this. And I'm like, I think I need to talk about this. I think I need to talk about sources and remind people sort of where I'm coming from in this regard and what's important to me and what I think should be important to those who claim to have sources. And I'm not saying there is nobody else that has a source. I don't know. I don't fucking know. There could be 500 other channels that have way better sources than I do. 100%. This isn't about that. I'm not about that. I'm not about one-upping people. I could not care less. I'm just being me, doing my own thing here. But I do care about the proper information. And I do care about being properly represented. And when somebody mischaracterizes me or I get a few DMs where I think people might be getting the wrong impression, I like to nip that in the ass and say, well, hang on a sec here. I understand, totally understand how you might see it that way, but here's where I'm coming from. Here's a situation of why I'm saying this, okay? And why it's important to me, all right? And I think it should be important to everybody because we've all seen people, I got a source, it's got a source, it's got a source, and we all kind of roll our eyes and because it's so easy to say. Anybody can say it, right? Anybody can say, I know somebody who knows somebody, and maybe they do. Maybe they do, but it's very easy to manipulate. It's like psychics, right? Now, I tend to be somebody who believes that there may be people in this world that possess a certain ability to either see the future or talk to dead people, for a lack of a better way of saying it. That sounds so fucking cheesy. Maybe there is, right? Maybe there is. Maybe I tend to believe that there might be something to it. There might be. I don't mean the charlatans. Maybe they're all charlatans. I don't know. But not like the obvious ones that have been called out. But I mean, who knows, right? But because psychic ability is so easy to manipulate through a process called cold reading, and there are, people that can show you this online and how it's done. And if you learn how to cold read, if I knew how to cold read, I could get everybody in this room thinking that I knew their future, no problem, like that. No problem, right? So it's not necessarily that it isn't true, but it is easily manipulated. It is easily faked. And when it comes to, it can be easily faked, I should say. So when it comes to, saying you have a source, anybody can say that, right? Anybody can say that and spew out information. Anybody can do it. And there are people that no doubt do it and don't have any sources at all, 100%. So, and I don't know who those people are. Well, sometimes I can tell who they are, but I don't know who they are. And then there are some people that do have them, right? And may have better ones than me, like I said. All I can do is be me and let you know what I think is important in this kind of regard. So just to recap here, number one, in my experience, reputable, connected people, not Jim knows Bob knows Steve knows Don, firsthand type of shit, very rarely give you information. Very rarely. And there's a number of reasons for that. Their jobs are on the line. They've signed NDAs. And I know what you might be thinking. Oh, NDAs don't matter. Listen, a non-disclosure agreement may not matter to the fucking numpty that went to see Halloween Kills screening because they're an average Joe that doesn't work in the business. But when you work in the business, an NDA means a lot. I've signed many NDAs in my life, and the last thing I want to do is get into some real shit because it affects your reputation. You will not be hired to work on shit. If your rep, if it gets out there that, yeah, Dave's a blowhard and doesn't abide by his NDAs, nobody's going to want to hire you again, right? And it's a legal document. So it may not mean much to, Jimmy and Susie who have to sign a little NDA because they aren't in that world. They don't know, they don't care. They're going to post all this shit on Reddit the next day. It's not a big deal. But for people who work in the business, especially at even higher like executive levels or acting levels or, depending on where you are, I'm telling you, they take it very seriously. Every NDA I've ever signed, I take seriously, right? There's something I've worked on this past fall, actually, that I would love to talk to you about that I can't because it's VO work, obviously, but I can't because I signed an NDA. I don't know when I'm waiting for the first, info to come out so I can actually talk about it, but I can't. And I wouldn't, because if I did, then that person's going to say, well, don't hire Dave MCRAE again to do that. It's a big industry, but it's a small industry, and it's about relationships, and if it gets out there that nobody's going to want to hire you again. So it may not mean much to, as I said, the average person, but NDAs mean a lot for people who work in the business. That doesn't mean everybody. I know there are people out there that, that do talk, but I'm just mean in a general sense, right? So that's number two. They don't want to lose their jobs. They don't want to ruin their reputations, right? They've signed NDAs. And very rarely do these people talk. And if they do talk to you, it means that you forged a relationship built on trust, that they trust you, that you're not going to say anything. And that takes time. That takes time and a certain level of, kind of thing, right? In my mind, that is the only type of information that I would ever release on social media. I think it's the only kind of information anybody should release. If you have a source, a reputable source, right? Let's say you do. I don't know if you don't, maybe you do. And they give you info and it's juicy info. And you know that, okay, this is probably true. This is probably completely accurate. And they're okay with you saying, yeah, just don't mention me, but you go ahead. Because they're giving you that, that exciting info. That is the only time that anybody should be mentioning anything, is when you are like above 95% sure. Based on the credibility of the source, why they would have that info, right? Not John knows Steve, knows Bob, knows Don, and Don has the info. Why would Don have it? And then there's telephone tag, and maybe there's or not, is it? No, it's not telephone tag, but the information gets passed down, right? You want firsthand info. That's what you want. You want firsthand info. You don't want ninth-hand info, because who knows what details and nuances have been lost being passed down. And that's why my father made 50 phone calls. That's why he'd make another 50 the next day. And that's no exaggeration, by the way. My dad didn't just call, Bob and John and go, okay, great, I'm going to write the column. No, because Bob and John might be hearing it from Susie and Steve. So my dad's got to call Susie and Steve. And then Susie and Steve might be hearing it from Bill and Ted. That's right, Bill and Ted. So my dad's got to call Bill and Ted. And then Bill and Ted, says, oh, I can't tell you who it was, but I'll, you can talk to this person. And then my dad's got to call that person. That's what good journalism is about. I'm not saying that this is journalism. It's not. But I'm just saying that those principles have always been important to me. So I do agree with those who roll their eyes at the idea of sources and things like that. Because, yeah, the average person doesn't have a source at all. And if they do, it's Bob who knows Steve who knows Jim. And they just like the clout of it, to be able to say, I know this or I know that. That's not everybody. But I wanted to just talk about this today because I think this is very important. My advice to all those channels, whoever you are, and again, I don't know who does this and who doesn't. I really don't. But my advice to all channels is, if you do have a source, ask yourself, who is my source? How are they connected? What is their relationship? What is the probability of them having this info being correct? And then is it worth me putting my reputation on the line and saying this? And if the answer is no, then don't do it. And if you're getting info every day or every week from this person, chances are, it's not completely accurate. Because sometimes studios will put out false information as well. Will lie to you. Sometimes they will do that. They will put out misinformation on purpose because they don't want the real information there. So I needed to talk about this because, and again, it's not for any specific reason in terms of like, in terms of it's the reason I think it's important is because of many of the DMs that I got who were not just showing skepticism, which is fine, but were being the vitriol behind it. Like very sort of, and there was enough of them, passive aggressive. And I thought, okay, I need to talk about this, not just make a social media post, but talk about it so people understand where I'm coming from and why I take it as seriously as I do. So hopefully that gives you some insight into where I'm coming from, what I think is important about having a source, where I think the probability should be when you start relaying information, and understand that if somebody is saying, every fifth video or sixth video or whoever you're watching, and again, I'm not talking about anybody specific, and I sincerely mean that. I'm not, because I don't know who does it and who doesn't. But I do know some people do because people have told me in their messages to me, actually not talking about channels, but just saying, I watched this guy or I watched this person or whatever. So whoever they are, if they're doing it all the time, chances are it's bullshit, because very rarely do reputable sources talk for the reasons that I said. It's once in a blue moon you will get information that will be juicy enough and reputable enough to share. And I'm not somebody that wants to start rumors and the rumor mill, and I'm not about that. So hopefully that will clear up that for some of you out there that may not know where I'm coming from on that. And comment below and let me know your thoughts on what you think that I've had to say here today. Maybe you're somebody that does have legitimate connections in a certain way. And again, connections it's like this. It's like, well, here's a good example. So, let's say you are a big fan of Frank Welker. Frank Welker is a legend voiceover actor. He was the voice of Fred on Scooby-Doo. He's actually the most recent voice of Scooby-Doo. He was, I think, Transformers, and he's been a ton of shit. He's older, he's like 70 something. He's up there now. And he's a legend in VO. Frank Welker, a legend. He's one of the many voices of your childhood, right? It would be like somebody using me as a source because I'm a voice actor, and so is Frank Welker. I don't know Frank Welker through a fucking hole in the wall. I've never met the man. I've never met him. If you were to ask Frank Welker, hey, do you know who Dave McCrae is? He'd probably say, no, I have no idea who the fuck he is. Right? So again, it's important to remember that just because you know somebody in a certain position in the industry doesn't mean that they're automatically your connection and right to start talking about, do you know what I mean? So it's again, and I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but it is the fundamental principle. It's the difference between Bob knows Steve knows John knows Paul and firsthand. And, there's a bit of a difference there, right? So incredibly important. Not everybody knows everybody in the business, and it's important that you weed through and you do your best to try and find information that is more firsthand. The source. That's what it's all about, right? It's about the source. It's in the name. I have a source. No, you don't have a source. I mean, you do, but you don't. What you have is you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And again, I'm not talking about anybody specific. I'm just saying, generally speaking, that's, I think, what people are talking about. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now, but it's important information that I think is very important. And again, just to reiterate, for those that might just be tuning in or that might be turned off by what I'm talking about, I am not saying this because I think I'm all high and mighty. I'm not. I'm not saying this because I think I'm better than you. I'm not. I'm not saying this because I think I'm just, not at all. Not at all. It's just my experience, what I've learned, the people I've met, based on the information that I know. And the fundamental principles of what I learned from my father as one of Canada's top journalists. And that's it. That's it. You can take that information with a grain of salt. You can not listen to me whatsoever. You can still think the trailer is coming in 5 days. It's fine. Or in June, that's fine too. And maybe it will come in June. Maybe it will. Right? But based on what I'm hearing and this person who's told me this, who would be in a position to know something like that, I don't think it is. But we'll see, won't we? We'll see, because information changes. And maybe I'll get new information, So, but please, for the love of God, if you are going to be talking about information, make sure your information is sound, and make sure you really believe it. I think that's what it comes down to too, is that you're not spewing info for the sake of clicks or likes or, comments or algorithms. Is nothing to do with that. It's you truly are excited about the info. That's what I said in my social media post. I said that I did a few days ago. One of the things, the most important thing I hope people took away from that was when I said, I don't say this for clout. I say this because it genuinely excites me. And when this individual told me this, I got excited. And I got really excited to share that with you because I'm a Halloween fan. And it makes me really excited to share exciting things with you, especially exciting things that I know have high probabilities of being true. So I was like, oh my God, we finally know. My God, this is really exciting. And they know the date, by the way. But they haven't told me that. I don't know. So, again, information, right? They didn't tell me that. And rightly so. Why would they tell me that? It's a little too close to home. A little too close. But it's interesting, and it's important, that we remember to always be doing it for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. I know it can be tempting for likes and views and all that kind of stuff, but I cannot speak for anybody else, but for me, my reputation as, I guess, a YouTuber now, it's fucking weird. I hate that term, by the way. It sounds like I'm a starving artist. I prefer the term YouTube personality. It just sounds better. But anyway, but as somebody who, this is not my full-time job, obviously. I don't want to, it doesn't mean I won't be wrong here or there, but I would never put my neck out on the line like that if I wasn't sure. And I think we all need to be sure. I think we all need to be doing it for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons, not for likes, not for views, nothing like that. You should not give a shit whether that video gets a lot. Yeah, you always know it's probably going to, but that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it because I'm fucking excited, man. Oh my God. I'm really excited. It's not, yeah, I think it's coming. I don't get excited over that shit. I just don't. Well, I think it's going to be. And so who told you that? Well, Kevin told me that. And who's Kevin? Well, Kevin works in the room over there, and he knows Susie. And Susie said that, like, I don't want to deal with that. That's exhausting. You know, that's exhausting. I don't have time to make 100 phone calls. You know, it's too exhausting. So let's make sure, for those of you that are doing that, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, and you are sure of this information. And if you're not sure, you let people know you're not sure. Honesty and transparency. You need to be always honest with your viewers, because it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I heard this, but I don't really know. Sounds kind of strange to me. And you really did hear it. It's not something you're making up for the sake of, it's a slow news week, so I'm just going to make something up. And people do that too. Whether it's Star Wars, I can't tell you how many fucking times during the whole Rise of Skywalker thing, I'd watch people talking about Star Wars and this and that, and said this and that, and the info that people were spewing about test screenings and Lucas cut and JJ cut and Kathleen cut and Bob Iger cut. That's not how the business works. And I would sit there and I would laugh and I'd think, oh my God, these people are literally making bullshit up. They're making bullshit. They are stirring it around and it's just made up. And that frustrates me. That frustrates me. So don't be one of those people. And if you do have a connection here or there, use it wisely. Use it sparingly. Use it when you are sure of something. Not for likes or views or clicks. You know, because it's your reputation, not the sources, because they're anonymous. It's your reputation that ultimately will suffer. And I mean, if you were to give who the source was away, that's a different thing. But I'm talking about if you keep the anonymity of the relationship intact and you're not a fucking idiot and spew who the name is, they're anonymous. So nobody's going to know it was them. It's your reputation that's on the line. It's your reputation that will ultimately suffer. And that's why it's important that the only info that comes out of your mouth should be info that is that you are sure of, based on as much firsthand knowledge as you can possibly get, not 30th hand. Anyway, I've talked long enough here, but I just wanted to hammer that home and make sure that people understand what I believe, the title of the video is Sources, How They Work and How They Don't. Really should be How They Should Work and How They Should Don't, or How They Should Work and How They Shouldn't. So I might change the title of the video to that after we're done here. But those are my thoughts. Those are my opinions based on what I've learned and my experience. So for the people who've been sending me DMs, and there's quite a few of them, hopefully that clears that up for you. But I thought it was a good topic for a show as well. Because I like talking about these kinds of things. I find it interesting. I like sharing knowledge with you guys. I think you guys are fucking amazing. And shout out, by the way, shout out to Jimmy Champagne, who, great channel, by the way. Poor guy, he sent me he did a video talking about the image and the trailer and all that kind of stuff, I guess a few days ago, whatever it was. And he sent me a message. He's like, oh my God, I think I got some of your, viewers harping at me, taking things out of context or something. And I'm like, oh my God, are you serious? Anyways, we had a good chat. He's a hell of a guy, and he's very good at what he does. So, guys, I would like to think anyway. And again, I can't speak for the other channels. I ultimately don't know what I've always had great conversations with them. I've always really liked the guys from Wham and Champagne and Leach and Lee, and I don't have any issues. I think they're all great dudes. If I didn't think they were great dudes, Sean over at, Fandom Empire too, I think he's a great dude. If I didn't think these guys were great dudes, I just wouldn't associate with them. It's that simple. I think they're genuinely really good. Now, I don't know what they think of me. I would assume that they're okay with me, but I think they're great guys. And Jimmy, don't go over to their channels and start yelling and screaming at them or whatever. And please don't do that. It's tacky. It's tacky. So please don't do that. Whoever did do that, by the way, please don't do that. But Jimmy's a nice guy, and he's a funny dude. But yeah, so those are my thoughts. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. I feel very passionate about this, like I said, because of how I grew up. So it's a bit of a pet peeve for me when I see people mischaracterizing me, but also playing with that world of information so carelessly. So carelessly. It bothers me. Okay. Shut up, Dave. All right, let's go back and see what we got going on here in the super chat area. We got Fandom Empire. Speaking of Sean, there he is, Fandom Empire. Says, source told me H5 sucks. New AC/DC album rocks. Well, that's true. I think you are actually correct there. So I totally believe that one. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate that. If it is Sean, it might be one of the other guys over there. David Lee Barron sends in $1.99, says, do you recommend Hereditary? Absolutely, I do. I loved Hereditary. Best horror film, in my opinion, of 2018, 2019, something like that. Harry Hagen sends in $4.99. My man, Harry, says, how does movie rights work? For example, is Halloween owned by Miramax, Universal, and Malak Akkad, and Blumhouse licensed the IP to produce films? Great question. Well, the rights, I believe, are owned by Malak and Trancas International. The distribution rights would be Universal. Blumhouse is the production company. So Blumhouse, they're the ones that make the movie. So Blumhouse is the ones that would hire the director, hire the crew. You know, they are the ones making the movie, but Universal Pictures, they're the ones distributing the film. So, but I believe the rights, like the actual IP, the intellectual property to Halloween would belong to Malak Akkad. I don't think it's removed from the Akkads. I don't think the Akkads they wouldn't give that up. Now, they have contracts and deals in place, obviously. So whatever Halloween makes at the box office would be distributed. It's not like Malak gets, 100% of it. There's contracts and deals in place. But I believe it's Malak. I believe it's him. And Blumhouse is the production company, right? So they would be like, that's a very surface level of saying it, but that, I believe that does answer your question. So we'll see. We'll see here. Let me just see. Did I miss any others? Gary Rangel sends in $2 and says, hey, Dave, did you watch Spiral yet? Good Saw film. I've not seen Spiral. Yet. No, I have not. I believe I got all the super chats, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go over to... what else you guys are saying? Tabitha Short, Tabitha, my lady, says, gotta go, guys. Take care, Tabitha. Take care. Have a great day. Chris Baber says, I'll super chat once I get my new card. Got hacked by a dipshit spending thousands on iTunes. Oh, dude, that's terrible. I'm really sorry to hear that, man. I'm really sorry to hear that. Where are we there? There we are. Sorry to hear that. Very, very sorry to hear that. That's unfortunate. Oh, by the way, you want to see a cute picture of my father and I? Hang on a sec. Is this it? No, that's my dad outside of Graceland, which is pretty crazy. That's like 1970 something. My dad, believe it or not, my dad was going to interview Elvis Presley, like a couple of months after he died. He was going to interview him, but he died. Elvis died. I mean, not my dad, obviously. But yeah. Pretty cool photo. This is, it's my dad getting an award, but where's the one of my, hang on, where's the one? There's my dad and I. That's actually at my brother's wedding in about, I think 2009, I think that was. I thought that was a funny photo. And then there's a nice photo of my dad and I here. That's a nice photo. I really like that photo of my dad and I. Again, at my brother's wedding, my brother Bob, in 2009. I'm rocking the fedora, baby! Rocking the fedora. I love that photo. It's kind of weird to think that my dad, this is what my dad looked like essentially when he died, because he only died 2 years after this. And so he never, he's 67 here, I guess. So, but he never really grew old. I mean, like old, you know what I mean? Anyways, it's a cute photo. I like that. And I brought some others up here to show you earlier, but I got the plan for this show was much better than it was, but then I got technical issues with the server and my camera and all that kind of stuff, and it threw me for a loop. So my apologies, being if the show was a little disjointed today. I had some photos I want to show. If you do not follow me on Twitter, and maybe you're unaware of who my dad was, I brought up some of the cool photos that I shared on Twitter that I wanted to share with you guys. Let me see what else we got here. Oh yeah, that's my dad and him. My dad and me, I mean. There's my dad with John Candy. That's pretty cool. That was at an event in, I think that was at an event in Toronto in the early 90s, just after he did Only the Lonely, I think. That's a cool photo. They were hanging out at some party, I guess, or whatever. But pretty cool. And then,
Yes, what do you want, Earl? That's right. It's a great pen. A tremendous pen. That's the way it is. You gotta look at my tie. My tie, I don't like you. I don't.
This is obviously before Trump was president. This was, he was in Ottawa for some reason. And this could be like 2008, 2009 or whatever. It was quite a few years before he was president.
But that doesn't matter. I'm still the best. I'm the sexiest man in this photo. That's who I am. I love it.
It's a funny fucking photo though. I think it's great. Because Trump's just like,
fuck you. Fuck you.
My dad's writing that down. Pretty cool stuff. And I have a lot of others, but these are sort of my go-tos because they've been digitized. I actually have these digitally on my computer. There's a lot of other photos I have of my dad with some pretty cool people, but I have to scan them. I have to get them into my computer. My dad with Gene Simmons. I made this post the other day. I said on my social media, this is at some party, and I said, my dad, he's obviously doing the tongue thing, but Gene looks like borderline wax figure. Like my dad just kind of snuck in there to get his photo taken with this wax figure. It's very strange. It's very weird, but nonetheless, funny stuff indeed. I remember, and I again, like maybe this is 07, 08, somewhere around there. It would have been in the 2000s because my dad died in 2011. So this would have been in the 2000s for sure. And then this one here, I think we go back. Yeah, we go back. This is the Beatles. So on the right-hand side, you have Paul McCartney and John Lennon. And then on the left-hand side, if you see that guy in the glasses pointing his pen, that's my dad. This is 1966, something like that. And my dad, this is at the King Edward Hotel in downtown Toronto. And my dad, the Beatles are, especially John Lennon, is looking at my dad like, what? Because my dad had snuck up to their hotel room pretending to be somebody else, not a reporter, but pretending to be somebody else. This was, of course, back in the day when you can do that. And, you know, a set of confidence and you know, a sense of purpose, you could get in anywhere. You couldn't do that today, obviously. But back in the 60s, it was a lot easier to do that shit. And my dad got up to the hotel room and they opened the door. One of their security guards opened the door or something. And my dad pretended to be somebody else and he spoke to them for a moment, but then the security guard got suspicious, slammed the door in my dad's face. So then my dad made his way down to the back, which he assumed, which is where they'd be leaving the hotel when the crowd of people were at the front. This is like Beatlemania. This is like 65, 6, something like that. And my dad, when they came into the underground parking here or wherever they are, the basement, they turned to my dad and they're like, oh, it's you. It's it's that guy. And my dad's like, yeah, that's right. It's me. The jig was up at this point. They realized my dad obviously was a reporter. But such a great photo, like such a really, really cool photo that I absolutely adore. It's really awesome. And then what else? Oh, no, breaking news. Thought I had another one. There's my dad back in the 60s. It's such a, look at this hair. Definitely the 60s. And then I thought I had, no, maybe that was it. Yeah, I guess that's all I brought up because that one's the breaking news one. Yeah. Or whatever. Okay, cool. Yeah. So those are some of the, I have a lot more, but again, like I said, they're not digitized. So, you know, a really cool, my dad, and again, it wasn't all fun. I mean, it was tough growing up with my father too, because my father was the kind of guy that, you know, he knew how he wrote the truth in a lot of ways, and he knew how to stir the pot. And my dad, a lot of people loved my father, and a lot of people didn't like my dad. So that was hard growing up. I was bullied sometimes because kids would bully me. It's not that the kids didn't like me. It's just that their parents didn't like my father, right? So, they say, oh, there's Earl McCrae's son, we're going to bully him, and that kind of stuff. So that was always hard. But thankfully I got myself into shape and the bullying sort of stopped after that. but certainly it was tough. It wasn't always easy. I remember I played hockey as well. And I remember my dad wrote an article about a certain section of the Ottawa Valley, which is near Ottawa. Again, that's our Washington, D.C., so it's a political town. And I remember playing hockey in this sort of this small town kind of in the suburbs of Ottawa. And, of course, I had MCRAE on the back of my jersey. Well, you can imagine, like fucking parents. Like, I can understand if kids on the ice were like, oh, fucking MCRAE, oh, fucking hate your dad's a piece of shit or something, right? They're kids. You expect that. But parents from the stands, hit that fucker MCRAE! Get that MCRAE! Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. Like, from the parents. I swear to God, I wanted to beat the shit out of the parents. So some parent, but they're fucking losers. You know what I mean? Like, why would you, the fuck you doing? You're like 40. What are you doing? Anyway, so it wasn't always easy, certainly. But it was interesting. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how to handle myself in certain situations in the business. And even though, like I said, I never followed in my father's footsteps directly, a lot of the lessons and things that I learned are in the back of my head with certain situations and scenarios I found myself in. So pretty cool. David Lee Barron sends in $4.99, says, thoughts on the Travis Walton alien abduction case. He was on Joe Rogan recently. It's one of the most popular documented abduction cases in the U.S. It is. I'll tell you this. I don't think he did himself any favors by being on Joe Rogan. I saw that interview. It's nothing to do with him. I just think Walton was garbage. I think that was a terrible interview. I think Walton looked nervous. He looked old and just boring. He was boring as fuck. There was a great interview that Travis Walton did about 17 years ago on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie, that late night talk show that is on at like 1 o'clock in the morning, depending on where you are in the world. And he was more with it. He was more, and maybe it's because he's older and he's just, I don't know, he's got a couple of brains. He didn't look good on Rogan. And I'm somebody that wants to believe that. It's an interesting story. Of course, it's based on, or Fire in the Sky is based on that story. Fire in the Sky takes a lot of creative liberties, just so people know. Even Travis Walton himself said that alien abduction at the end and the poking and the prodding, like to that thing and him being nude and all that, that never happened. Like that never happened. That's Hollywood doing their shit. But the principle, not the principle, but the story is cool. And it's weird. Like no one's changed their story. It was like 5 big, tough logging guys. And it's interesting. Do I believe it? I don't know. I tend to believe the Benny and Barney Hill story a bit more, which is the first, real kind of big major abduction case. It's like the granddaddy of them all. But Travis Walton is up there, but his appearance on Rogan didn't, if you're a believer and you want to believe him, didn't look good. He didn't look convincing to me. He looked nervous. And maybe he was nervous, and that's not necessarily a sign that he's lying, but he just didn't look credible. You could say, take somebody like Bob Lazar. Now, maybe Bob Lazar is full of shit. Maybe he is, right? Maybe he is. Maybe Bob Lazar is full of shit. But man, is he convincing. He knows his stuff like this. His story has never changed. He's a smart guy. He's very convincing, right? Obviously, he's not as old as Travis Walton, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. Travis Walton didn't look credible. But if you're asking my thoughts on just the story that he told years and years ago, who knows? I don't know. I mean, I sort of believed it years and years ago. I'm a little more skeptical now as I get older and get wiser, but maybe. You never know. You never know. Let me see here. Destiny Faulkner says, oh, my dad also died in 2011. My condolences to you, Destiny. I did not know that. Not that I would know that, but that's new information about you I did not know. It's tough, isn't it? Yeah, it's very tough. It's always tough. Hans Gruber says Gene probably tried to charge him for doing the tongue thing. Oh, he copyrighted that, you know. Yeah, or he didn't notice. I know he did. It's fucking insane. Like, really? But it's funny. When I look at the photo now, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. When I looked at the photo 15 years ago, however long it was, I was in my 20s, obviously. And I was like, oh, Dad, you know, sometimes my dad would be a little embarrassing. Sometimes it was embarrassing because my dad knew how to, but sometimes, you know, you got perks, right? Like, I mean, sometimes I was very fortunate, in the early 90s when Ottawa got an NHL team, the Ottawa Senators. I know, Senators. Anyway, such a political town. I don't think they mean it in that way, though. They mean it more of the old school. Anyway, I remember I met a lot of really cool NHL hockey players because I remember after I get to go to the games for free. I'd have really great seats. And I remember after the game, my dad would tell me to go to a certain spot in the stadium where there were these stairs. And it's where a ton of crowd of people would hang out because the players at the end of the game from the opposing team and the home team, I'm sure there are other ways too, but generally they would come up those stairs to leave the arena. And when they came up the stairs, of course, there'd be crowds of people wanting their autographs and photos and stuff. And my dad always used to tell me, go to those stairs and wait for me. Now, he didn't do this all the time, but especially when the Buffalo Sabres were playing, he did this. Not with everybody, but, or if I brought like I remember bringing my friend Derek. Shout out to Derek Watkins in Ottawa. Haven't talked to him in years, but I remember his favorite team was the Montreal Canadiens, which is like the New York Yankees of hockey, right? And I remember my dad would get us tickets if the Senators were playing the Canadiens or whatever, right? And he would tell us to go to the stairs and all that. So, but anyway, so I would go to the stairs and I would wait, and some players would come up, but then my dad, you'd see my dad coming up. And my dad would, and I felt like a celebrity. It was crazy. I'm like, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, right? My dad would come up and he would point to me and point at the security guard to let me come down. And I got to walk down the steps to the dressing rooms. And I got to go into the dressing rooms of the Buffalo Sabres and the Montreal Canadiens. And it was really cool. And I met a lot of legends that way. Patrick Waugh and, you know, Grant Fuhrer. And I mean, these names might not mean much to the average U.S. non-hockey enthusiast out there, but it's like meeting I'm trying to think of meeting Patrick Waugh would be like meeting, you know, Peyton Manning, you know what I mean? Or, you know, Brett Favre of, you know, the NFL, right? Like it was like, fuck, you know what I mean? It was really cool. And I got to meet Pat LaFontaine, and that was cool. Got my photo taken. The coolest was this. I think I told this. I remember when my dad took me to the morning skate. So the game was at night, and my dad took me to the morning skate because the morning skate was just open for the media. And so like the public was not there, but I got to go with my dad. And I remember my dad, we went down those stairs and there was nobody there except for the team and the media, which was really great. And I got to meet Pat LaFontaine, who is an American-born hockey player, one of the greatest of all time, Hall of Famer, played for the Buffalo Sabres. And he was my favorite hockey player. Still is to this day, probably my favorite of all time. And I got to meet him that morning. He came out. My dad did, you know, an interview with him. And it's crazy to think at the time Pat LaFontaine was probably like 27 years old. You know what I mean? He looked so much older to me. But anyway, so, and I got to meet him and shook his hand. And we talked for 10 minutes about hockey. And I was telling him about my hockey team. And he was so gracious, so generous. Now, the really cool thing was later that night, I went to the hockey game that they were in town, right? And I went to the game that night. I can't remember if I was on my own or if I was with a friend. But at the end of that game, so this is only like maybe, 10 hours later or 12 hours, let's say. So it's not like it's years later, but I remember going down the steps and my dad brought me down and I remember walking into the dressing room of the Buffalo Sabres and walking in, and just as I entered, Pat LaFontaine, I don't know if he came around the corner or something, and he goes, "Hey, Dave, how's it going?" Well, fucking 11-year-old me lost I was like, he remembers me. I felt so, of course he remembers you. He's not meeting any other kids at the morning skate. It was only like 10 hours ago. You know what I mean? But still, that goes to show you the kind of guy Pat LaFontaine was. He was classy. He was approachable. He was like the kind of celebrity that you know how they always say, don't meet your heroes. And I get it. I agree with that. But it was really cool because he's one of those guys that was the kind of thing you hear about how they were so gracious and nice. He was one of those guys. And the fact that he remembered my name, I like lost my shit. And he's there and he signed my fucking jersey. And I remember, we're talking and, other guys are coming by. Who's this little guy? Whatever. It was really cool. It was really, really cool. So, those are some of the stories those are some of the really cool moments. Some of the perks, obviously, having a dad like my dad. But like I said, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, as Rocky would say. There obviously was, there were some difficult moments too growing up, but those were some of the highlights for sure. And it was really cool. It was really cool. David Lee Barron sends in $4.99. Thoughts, David? Wait. I already got that. Let me see here. We got Frank Riker says, Dave, can you rank these friendships based on their strength? Han, Chewie, Andy, Red, Kurt, Spock. Oh, that's a great fucking question. Okay, well. I think the relationship between Andy and Red has the potential to be something very special and powerful. At the end of the Shawshank Redemption, when we see Red approaching Andy on that boat at the ocean, that is really the beginning of their friendship. That is the beginning of something really special. They've just been through a really amazing time. And that bond, now their friendship, now the journey really begins. Do you know what I mean? So I think that it has a really strong potential there. You mean Kirk and Spock, right? Kirk and Spock. I think Kirk and Spock are sort of like Han and Chewie. It's more business. Andy and Red, it's more personal. It's about survival. It's not that Kirk and Spock don't have that. And it's not that Han and Chewie don't have that personal bond as well. They do, but their relationship is more about, it's more business. It's always about, it's about flying ships and you know what I mean? It's more business, whereas Andy and Red feels to me it's more personal. Again, not that Han and Chewie and Kirk and Spock don't have a friendship there and a personal one. They do. But there's just something about Andy and Red. I don't know, man. I don't know. That's a good fucking question. I'm going to have to mull over that some more, man. Because that's a really good question, dude. That's a really good question. That's really good. David Lee Barron says, thoughts on The Witch? I like The Witch. I remember Bruce saying he wasn't a big fan. The Witch was shot up here, actually. And I liked it. I thought they could have done a little more with The Witch. But certainly I love the mood. I love the atmosphere. And I think it's a decent psychological thriller. But yeah, there were some creative decisions that I think I would have liked to have seen them do a little more on. I think would have been better, I think. But that's me. Let me see here. Chester Franklin Jr. says, Dave, besides Halloween and Halloween 2 themes, did you like the one Alan Howarth did for Halloween 4 to 6? And did you know Halloween 3 opening credits was done on a computer? Yes, I did know that. And Halloween 4, I do. I like the soundtracks for all of them. I like the soundtracks for 4, 5, and 6. Even though I don't like Halloween 5 and I don't like Halloween 6 either, I do like all of the soundtracks. Yep. I do. I think they're good. I have them, actually. I own them on CD, believe it or not. I bought them back in the day. So yes, I do that. Let's see. What else we got here? Destiny Faulkner says, definitely he was 30, 10 years gone this month. Oh, that's so young. So young. He's younger than me. He's younger than me. That's crazy. That's crazy. Well, again, my condolences to you and your mom and your family for that. It's tough. It ain't easy. It's tough. But he's there with you always, right? He's there with you always. He's there with you always. He's there with you always. Hans Gruber says, those black rimmed glasses back then made everyone look like the Zodiac. Oh, yeah. Where is that here? Hang on a sec. Where's that photo? Oh, hey, there's that one. That's my dad with Robert Kennedy, by the way. This is probably about maybe a month before Robert Kennedy was assassinated. That's that other one that I wanted to show you. Where's that one of my dad? You're right. Where is it? No. Yeah, you're you're right. He does. He does look like the Zodiac. You are absolutely correct. He does sort of look like the Zodiac. Yep. Next thing you know, I'll be seeing all over the news that the Zodiac is, it's my father. That'd be fucking hilarious. That'd be awful, actually, but nonetheless. Mike Johnson says, wow, that is pretty cool, Dave, that he was going to do an interview with Elvis. He was, yeah. I remember that. It was Elvis died August 16th, 1977. My dad, that photo of my dad, which is the first photo, it's this one here. This photo is earlier than that. This might be like early 70s. Like Elvis was alive when this photo was taken. And I don't know if he was home when this photo was taken, but he was alive when this photo was taken for sure, if I'm not mistaken. I think, unless it was after. Maybe it was after. Maybe this might have been 78 or 79. I don't know. But anyway, nonetheless, yes, he was. My dad, the plan, the wheels were in motion for my dad to do an interview with Elvis basically that summer. But he died. And Elvis to my dad was like Harrison Ford to me. You know what I mean? Like my dad loved Elvis, as a lot of people did who grew up with Elvis in the 50s and the 60s, right? I mean, my dad was born in 42. So, when Elvis sprung onto the scene, my dad would have been like, 13, 14. I mean, my dad had the big pompadour and the sideburns and, maybe not the sideburns, but certainly, everybody was, the James Dean kind of look, right? That was my dad's era. So, yeah, especially, being a young man, teenage boy in the 50s, that was a big deal. So my dad loved Elvis. And the reason why I know so much about Elvis is because of my dad. My dad taught me a lot about him. His birthday is January the 8th, 1935, died August 16th, 1977. There's, so many other things I could tell you. What's really cool is I remember because my parents were divorced, my dad would drive me back and forth from Ottawa to Toronto, and those were some of the best times. We'd have amazing conversations, and my dad would tell me so many stories about people and funny stories and crazy stories and stuff, and I miss him dearly. It sucks. And he was only 69 when he passed. Like, he could be alive today. He'd be 79. He could be alive today, It'd be really cool. And it sucks that my dad's not alive today because I could get him on the show. He's my dad. I'd be like, Dad, what are you doing tomorrow? I don't know, nothing. Oh, come on out. You know what I mean? And obviously he lives in Ottawa, or he would live in Ottawa. I live here. And I would bring him on over Skype, you know what I mean? Or over Zoom or something. And I get my dad to tell you all sorts of crazy stuff. That would have been so much fun. My dad would have gotten a kick out of this. This kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, the YouTube and the shows and all that kind of stuff. He would have thought that was really cool. And obviously YouTube existed when my dad, was alive, but I mean, where it's evolved to now and how I have this little show and all that kind of stuff, my dad would have loved it. He would have loved it. Who knows? Maybe he would have had his own show on, I could totally see that. David Lee Barron says, which is worse, H5 or Halloween Resurrection? I think Resurrection is probably worse, but by like a marginal amount. I think I can watch H5 because it's got Dr. Loomis. Like, it still feels like it's got the Halloween kind of, it's got that going for it, but nothing else. So it's like Halloween 5, Halloween Resurrection. Like, it's just by a hair. It's like one of those, those things like, horse racing, things like that. It's very small. It's very, very small. Johnny Melancholy says, hey, Dave, what do you think about the opening of The Conjuring 2? It's a great depiction of the Amityville murders, I think. Oh, yeah, it's great. It's great. Yeah, myself and Tony just watched The Conjuring 2 on Two Dudes and Some Bullshit just a couple of days ago. So you can check that out if you haven't. Now, again, Tony and I will not be back this Monday. We have a couple of weeks off here because of Billy. We're in Billy mode. I'm in full Billy mode. There may not even be a MCRAE Live tomorrow. I'm not sure yet. Just a heads up on that. But yeah, we're in full mode here, so it's gonna be crazy. But a lot of fun as well. Tiffany Moses Shante says, hey Dave, my daughter and I are watching, and she says she misses your standalone videos intro, mood, and atmosphere. Oh, you mean she misses? Let's see here. She misses this. Wait, I missed it. Hang on. It's a fucking shit show. Hopefully that's okay to swear for your daughter. Mood and atmosphere. It's garbage. It's garbage. Mood and atmosphere. What did I used to say? I used to say, that's what I'm looking for. That's what it's all about. It used to be something like that. I forget what I used to say now. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm all about. Something like that. Yeah. Frank Riker sends in $5. Frank, my man, says, Dave, how would you rank these enemies based on hatred? Batman, Joker, Obi, Vader, Rocky, Drago. For sure. 100%. Drago murdered his best friend. 100%. Not murdered like, but, well, I mean, depending on how you look at it, it could be I would say Rocky, Drago. For sure. Because Batman and the Joker, they need each other. You know what I mean? Obi-Wan and Vader, I don't think he hates Vader. I think it's a sadness there because he used to be Anakin. Rocky and Drago for sure. Pedro's Lucario, is that how you say that? Pedro's Lucario. If I'm got it wrong, my apologies. Sends in $2. Says, did you know Forrest Gump thought Elvis's moves? You mean Forrest Gump taught Elvis's moves? Or you mean Elvis taught yes, Forrest Gump taught. That's right. And did you know that Elvis's voice in Forrest Gump is actually the voice of Kurt Russell? That's Kurt Russell doing that impression of Forrest Gump. That's Kurt Russell. That's Kurt Russell doing that impression of Elvis in Forrest Gump. Oh, that's right. Justin Goodrich says it's dog shit, I think was in there. It's dog shit. No, it's dog shit. Yeah, it was something like, it's a fucking shit show. There was something in there. And then I would say mood and atmosphere. No, it's garbage. It's garbage. Mood and atmosphere. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, it was something like that. Reminiscing, ladies and gentlemen. What do we got here? We are, 1 minute to go in the show. And then I have to skedaddle I was late today on the show for obvious reasons. And then I got skedaddle. Stuart Johnson sends in £4.99. It looks like that. Dave, wouldn't you think the Kills trailer would be out sooner than July, seeing we've been waiting an extra year? Well, it depends. It depends on... This is a different thing, right? Marketing departments and studios don't care what fans want, generally speaking. It doesn't mean, again, when I say the studios don't give a shit about what fans think or want, I don't mean that there isn't room for fans. I don't mean that they don't care at all. I say it harshly like that because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you want or think. This is a business. And there are strategic marketing plans in place for a variety of reasons. One of which is fans. But there's a variety of reasons of why they make the decisions they do. And we haven't got a poster yet. I could see a poster coming in June. I could see that. Yeah, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. When I was given intel on July, and I was given reasons why, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. A lot of films today, because of the pandemic, are shortening their marketing window from 4 months to 3 months because of the uncertainty of the world. Now, July 8th, it was 1 year. It'll be 1 year since they canceled the film. But you also have July 4th weekend in there as well. You have the Purge movie coming out there as well. Now, again, trailers today generally will drop online before they, are in the theater, but you have that movie there as well. That's universal release. 4th of July weekend. Things are starting to open up. It could be a symbolic thing as well. It's excitement, generating excitement because it's, I don't know. I don't know when in July because this individual didn't tell me, which is fine. That's totally fair. They don't have to tell me. But they were 100% certain based on intel that, yeah, it's July. Now, could it be something else? Maybe it will, maybe. But they don't make decisions, generally speaking, hey, you know what? It's been a while. Because there's many other factors. There's many other marketing departments are paying attention to what else is being released at that time. What is the competition at that time? What is the window? What else are we doing? What's the distance between the poster and the trailer? What's the distance between? There's so many factors. There's so many factors and stuff that I'm not even saying here that it never comes down to fans. If studios made decisions purely based on what the fans wanted, that's just not how you run a company. It's not how you run a company. It's not how you run a multi-billion-dollar industry, a multi-trillion-dollar industry. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. So maybe not multi-trillion, definitely multi-billion-dollar industry for sure. So yeah, I know people think June, and that's largely because of the marketing campaign of H18. We got the trailer for H18 on June 8th. I believe it was June 8th, if I'm not mistaken, or June 4th. June 4th or June 8th? I think it was June 8th. It was the beginning of June. So naturally people think, well, I think that's when we're going to get the trailer. Yes, but we also got the poster at the end of April. And we don't have a poster yet. And it's now May 20th. So it makes sense. I can see a scenario where you're going to get a poster in May. You're probably going to get a couple of, you may get one or maybe two more promotional images before the poster. But I could see a poster in June, excuse me, I think I said May, a poster in June with your trailer in July. That's what I haven't received any other info to the contrary yet. And if I do, I will let you know. But this is a vetted, trusted source in a position where they would have first knowledge of this info, not 30th knowledge from Bob who knows John who knows Steve. So it makes sense to me, and I felt confident relaying that to you. But it's important that we understand that, things can change. Things can change, right? Things can change. Frank says, for the sexy MFers in the chat who can keep their mouth shut and abide by NDAs. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Frank. You are amazing, but you know that. Southpaw82 sends in $5, says, back on my Kurt Russell binge of his films I'd not seen yet. Watched Tango and Cash last night. So far, Breakdown is my fave. Oh, Breakdown is probably my favorite Kurt Russell film. Breakdown, Overboard, The Thing, and fucking Escape from New York are probably my favorite Kurt Russell films. Yeah, I love Breakdown. If you guys haven't seen Breakdown from 97, 98? If you guys haven't seen Breakdown, watch it. Trust me, you'll love it. You'll think it's great. You gotta watch it. You just have to watch it. I think Stuart Johnson got that one. I think I have gotten all the super chats. I believe I have. All right, folks, listen, that is going to do it for me for episode 173 of MCRAE Live. Thank you to my moderators, of course, Frank Riker, Tabitha Short, Darren Sands, Chris Baber. You guys are amazing for doing what you guys do. You know that. You guys are awesome. Thank you for doing that and keeping this well-oiled machine going in the chat room. I really appreciate it. Thank you to the Super Chat questions that came in, the non-Super Chat questions, of course, that came in. You guys are amazing. I appreciate it very, very, very much. And if I don't see you tomorrow, which is a possibility, have a great weekend. And yeah, and I'll see you next week. Next Tuesday would be the time. If there's no MCRAE Live tomorrow, next Tuesday is when you'll get it. But next Tuesday's show will not be 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because next Tuesday I'm having the lovely ladies of It's Me, Billy on the show. And so we have to push the show to the evening because that works best for their schedules. And I want them to be on the show for the duration of the show, not just for 5 minutes here or there. I want to be an all-centric, It's Me, Billy show. So, with them. So that's exciting as well. So, but I still could be back tomorrow morning. We shall see. Folks, have a great rest of your Thursday. Stay safe out there. And yeah, I will talk to you soon. Alrighty. Cheers.